Hello and welcome to the Music Ministry Clinic with Chime. My name is Chime Odimba, or Chime for short, and I'm your host in this clinic. I'm excited to be here today as we start this journey to educate, empower, and liberate the minds of the music minister. In today's episode, we'll be taking a look at the history of church music in Nigeria. And at least from my perspective, I believe that this is an important step in diagnosing and offering treatment to whatever issues that we think we may be having today. You know, there's a saying that you need to know where you're coming from to know where you're going to. And that's just what we want to do today. So without much ado, welcome once again, and let's get started. Many church members today will not believe that there was a time when musical instruments was not a thing. I mean, you don't come to church and see musical instruments. Our musical instruments were our hands, and we used to clap them. Some other churches had maybe local drums, but those are not very common either because many Pentecostal churches frowned on them as they associated them with pagan worship. So we basically did not have musical instruments of any kind in the church back in the day. For me, my first experience with musical instruments in church was around 1984. My family had then been transferred from Lagos to Enugu. When we got to Enugu, we met, we saw a church where musical instruments was back. They were already using musical instruments. That was Assemblies of God Church Owani. And they were already using musical instruments. Of course, as a young person, I was fascinated. At that point, I learned the guitar and the drums. So that was where I learned the guitar, to play the guitar and the drums. Sometime in 1987, we were transferred back to Lagos. But when we came back to Lagos, I could already play the guitar and the drums, but that was pretty much it. There was nowhere to play. My church did not have any instrument, and no church around that I knew of had any musical instrument. So it was not a thing then. But as time went on, around by the time we had come back to Lagos, by the time we returned to Lagos around 1987, a few churches were beginning to have musical instruments. A very few churches. In fact, I think some of the churches, the first set of churches that started having musical instruments, that started really using musical instruments was maybe like Church of God Mission. Those were by Church of God Mission was the standout church at that time because, we used to remember the mass choir songs they used to do back then, and they were the guys. They were the guys, if you know what I mean, back then. Christ Chapel had their own style, but they were not doing live music. They were doing something that was unique, new. They were using soundtracks. This was more popular around the 90s, so I'm not really sure when it started for Christ Chapel, but they were using soundtracks, and it was also a thing for them. But they had special songs that their Dr. Tunde Joda then came back with, and soundtracks that they could sing. But basically, church music was your hands. But as we progressed, those of us who have started playing musical instruments were able to find ways maybe to just play whenever we could. So eventually, when churches started gradually getting, like my church, we finally got our own musical instrument around 1993, around that time. But before then, we had occasions where we had to hire musical instruments. At least we could now play. A few of my friends then could play. A few other people could play. So from time to time, we had special occasions. We would hire musical equipment, and then we would play. We're very excited to play. And churches were beginning to discover that their young people wanted this thing. This is something that their young people wanted. And so they were now beginning to look at it. So my church got our own musical instrument around 1993. A lot of other churches at that time started having musical instruments. And there was something that was profound about that time. We had a lot of young people in the church who are playing the musical instruments. It was common to have a church. Once you had a church with musical instruments, you had young people flocking there. There was always a group of young people who would play. So you could have 3 drummers, how many keyboardists, and many times we could always change. I was the drummer, I was keyboardist, I was bassist, depending on what was required at the time. So churches had more music volunteers. I mean, there were more music volunteers than there were churches with instruments. So it was a common thing then to have churches with multiple sets of musicians. I mean, well, I'll call them, so let's call them instrumentalists, multiple sets. So for those churches, it became like something of like they were doing you a favor to allow you play for them. And that became a thing. It's, of course, it's important to state here that at this point, practically everyone who I knew it was a hobby. We're just doing because we could play. We really there was no thought of the future. There was no thought of anything. Just, I'm playing, I can play. We just enjoy ourselves and we would play. But as demand rose gradually, and more churches started having instruments, we started finding out that the musicians were now more in demand. I remember a particular time when a pastor of a church close to us, the wife had to come. There was a church close to us. The wife had to come to my church, and after Sunday school, would quickly rush to their church, play their praise and worship, and then run back to my church. And we did this for a while. So the demand was growing. As demand was growing, professionalism was also growing. Some people are now beginning to look at it as, okay, something that could be done as a profession, and the evolution started gradually. And at the same time, there was also some churches were beginning to make greater demands of the musicians. They started having greater demands, greater tastes. I mean, musical taste started improving. Things were picking up pretty quickly. I mean, music was fast becoming an important part of church. So every church tried to have at least a drum set and a small keyboard. I remember Casio was very popular then. But as music became more commonplace in churches, the standards were rising, as you'd expect, and very quickly too. I think one of the a group that must be given credit for their role in the growth of church music is Integrity Music. That's Don Wen's Integrity Music, especially Ron Kennelly, Abraham Laboriel, Tom Brooks, and his group. These guys really had a lot of made a lot of impact in Nigerian music, and this was what formed the basis of many of the guys who became the major guys in Nigerian church music. From this point on, there was no turning back. The growth was very, very, very rapid, and churches were now demanding musicians. Musicians were now in demand. So, in the 90s, some churches had started paying musicians, or by the time we're getting to the turn of the century, with the popular Y2K, it was now a thing. I mean, the competition was serious. Churches had instruments. They didn't just want musicians, they wanted the best musicians. They wanted the best they could have. It was now a very rampant thing. And then a lot of musicians were already being paid, but a lot more churches were still struggling with paying musicians. And if you wouldn't pay musicians, then, well, you would have to make do with volunteers who were, of course, not necessarily very good. So at this point, we now had professional musicians who were not only very good, but also demanded payment for their service. Not just any payment, but good payment for their service. So this was the period when the payment wahala started, and the back and forth between churches, musicians not paying well really started. So it is just an issue of economics, demand and supply. There was a demand for good quality instrumentalists, and if you couldn't pay for the good musicians, you had to make do with what you had. And if you didn't have anyone, well, you had to be forced to begin to pay. So churches that wanted good music had to pay to get good musicians. Those that didn't want to pay had to make do with volunteers and the much quality that they could offer them. A lot of churches remained at this point, and some churches are even still trying to work with volunteers up till date. As someone who was smack down in the middle of this situation, there was one important thing that I really want to point out. I think it's really important because it's probably one of the reasons why we have certain challenges today. You see, most of the churches I knew then did not respect the boys. I mean, there's some. I remember one particular event where we were playing, and of course we are young boys, and we were excitable. But the way I remember this pastor particularly calling us band boys and commanding us to all leave the area immediately. I mean, somebody was playing something. I think they were an announcement was going on, and somebody was playing something, and the way the the pastor spoke, this was decades ago, but I still remember it very clearly. So they were not really respected because, well, like I said, for many of them, they still felt they were doing the musicians a favor. Another key thing that stood out was the fact that many of the musicians that I knew back then, especially those who are taking it seriously, were often guys who are struggling. I mean, they are not guys from rich or comfortable homes. They were guys who are from struggling homes. In fact, I know personally one of the best drummers that Nigeria has ever produced. He came to Lagos by himself around the age of 13. He came to Lagos by himself at the age of 13, and he had been hustling with his drums since then, as a drummer since then. So most of the people then were those who were classified as ne'er-do-wells, or not from well-to-do or even comfortable homes. So I remember a few guys then who were asked by concerned church members what they wanted to do in life. I mean, this kind of subtly, just you're subtly telling them that what they were doing then was not anything or not worth it. I watched many musicians then drop out of music and start pursuing what the generality of people considered to be worth it. So some of them went to university to study. I know one went to study chemical engineering, dropped out in second year. I know a very good friend of mine who read engineering for 6 years and still ended up not graduating. And these are people who did not necessarily want to do. They just felt that everybody around them was making them feel like what they were doing was not worth it. And to conquer that feeling of inadequacy, they tried to please the people. Thankfully, some of them were able to find their way back and begin to make something out of themselves in their chosen field. A few others couldn't make their way back. But the message had been sent. What you're doing is not worth it. And this was a strong message that was sent in the church. And it continued. It continued for years. And in some cases, some people, it still is obtainable in certain places. With this mindset that the musicians had, that the church where they work in, what they do is not seen as worth it. What they do is not seen as something that should be pursued. Those of them who decided to remain in that field were people of strong character. But sadly, a lot of them felt they had to find a way to make the church respect them. And one of the ways they thought they could do this was to completely commercialize their talents. That is, you must pay me this. And people believe that. Not people, it's a general rule. If you pay a lot for something, you tend to respect that thing a little bit more. And this was what happened. So these very good musicians, who I happen to know a lot of them, yes, they were in high demand. So they set their fees, and you had to pay them. I remember a particular story. This story is really, it stayed with me. We used to play for a group back then, and we were invited for a program at a church. And this was back then when churches know you. Not now that they are management, they are managing the artists, they tell you this is what you need to know. The church invited this group, the organizers invited this group. We were playing for this group. So one of the conditions that the group gave the organizers was that the organizers, had to negotiate with us, the musicians. So the group was not going to pay the musicians, but the organizers were going to handle that. And the organizers agreed, they must have felt, okay, what the heck, we'll take care of it. So we were supposed to have a final rehearsal at the venue of the concert, evening of worship concert. So after the rehearsal that day, the organizers came. I almost said these organizers. The organizers came and wanted to have a meeting with us to ask us, okay, so what's it going to take? And obviously, the way they were talking, they had an idea of what they thought would be okay for these boys. And I'm talking about these guys, among the best guys as at that time, they were among the best guys in Lagos. I won't mention their names because a lot of people know them. These are the best guys in town then. So when they asked them how much they were going to take, they said, one of them said, mention the amount that each person was going to be paid. And I remember very clearly that one of the organizers, the main guy, the way they started laughing when the guy mentioned the figure, they really started laughing. And then after they laughed, they said, okay, you know what, we'll give you this, we'll give you X amount. And he mentioned an amount that was far lower than what the guy had said. And obviously they thought the guys were just joking. So the guy smiled and looked at them and said, no problem, we won't be there. And they started walking away. Me, as church boy that I am now, I was just standing there looking at them like, oh, God. So they said, we won't be there, and started walking away. I think at that point, the organizers understood that, wait, these guys are actually serious, and they were going away. So they quickly called us back and said, hey, okay, what? So that arrogant, condescending attitude that they had quickly faded, and it was replaced with, I beg, please. And so after a lot of begging and pleading and everything, they were able to reach an agreement that they didn't believe that they would have had to cough out then, reach an agreement. And when we had concluded, and the guys gave them conditional about when the payment was going to be received. They don't want to hear that after the program. No. They were not. Once they get to the program, they were going to be paid their funds, because a lot of guys had issues where you agree on something, after the program, everybody vanishes. Story. Personally, I have churches that are owing me. I have churches that are owing me over the years. I've just had to smile and let them all go. So this guy said, no, you're going to pay us before. And it was when we concluded, the organizer, and one of them now in particular looked at the keyboardist here. He just looked down at the shoes the keyboardist was wearing, and he now said, no wonder. It was amusing. When I think about it now, it was amusing because he looked down at the shoe and he looked at the quality of the shoe and said, no wonder. So I actually believe that these guys felt that that's the only way they would get respect. People just naturally disrespected them because they were musicians, they were instrumentalists. So they tried to treat them in a particular way. So, but once they came out that way and gave them the prize, and the respect that they didn't offer them freely was dragged out of them. For me, well, like I said, it was a sad development because they felt that was the only way they could get the much needed respect. I happen to know these guys, and yes, some of them were still had that mindset of money, everything, but a lot of them really were not like that, because I worked with them, and I discovered that was when I came to the conclusion that these guys just needed respect. People did not treat them with respect. Pastors did not treat them with respect. Did not. And sadly, a lot of pastors still don't treat their musicians with respect. They treat them like the boys, band boys. And once anybody is treated this way, they tend to present the front. They try to act in certain ways to either demand respect or, meet the expectations that whatever was expected of them. So the experience I had with those guys at that time made me understand a lot about. And I discovered since then that by working with them, in fact, once you treat them in a certain way, you get the best out of them. They are available for you. They're there. They are ready to do stuff for you, but they needed you to treat them with respect. So this was a very big sore point that sadly still affects the church till date. Many good guys who would have done great in the music ministry dropped off and started pursuing other things. So how did this affect the church? Well, what happened was that the number of volunteers kept on reducing. Before, you see a church had 3 sets of drummers, and they were all volunteers. None was paid. Now this number started reducing. Men who started taking it more seriously left. went to places where they felt they were better appreciated. Those who remained as volunteers also went into other things, reducing the time they had for music. So though they were not, they could still do a few things, but generally the quality that you expect from them would reduce because they spent most of their time at their day work and only were able to offer their spare time or reserve time to the music work. So basically, everyone was trying to make it. Everyone was trying to make it to gain respect. Everyone wanted to make it so no one was left to serve in the music bands, in the church music bands as volunteers. It became a rarity. It became the more as things progressed, they became rarer and rarer. As someone who spent most of my time with choirs, I saw the same trend beginning to happen among singers. And yes, eventually, after all the struggle, after struggling and struggling, most churches today have accepted and have started paying their instrumentalists. How much they pay is another question, but most churches have now, grudgingly or happily, whichever case, have accepted and have started paying their musicians. Yes, I know that some churches still don't pay. Well, that's not what we're talking about today, but most have started paying the musicians. However, the same mistake that was made with musicians, with the instrumentalists, is being repeated with the singers. And, well, it didn't start now, it just started a while before now. Let me give an example. In one church I worked with as a music director, the pastor's children were in the choir. But you know what? They were always missing choir rehearsals. Why? They were studying. I mean, not that they were in the university or travel, they were studying. Maybe they were studying, they had come back from school, but they were studying. So those who were left to come for rehearsals were those who were not studying. So they were children of those who didn't have, well, for want of what to say, those who didn't have a future, or those who didn't really have anything to pursue. So what we had was a choir where the children of the affluent and the well-to-do couldn't make rehearsals because they were studying, leaving just the children of those who were in need, families that were not really buoyant. Those are those who populated the choir. And I always see these things, and I understood even back then. I understood the message that was being sent. The message that was being sent was pretty clear. The more successful you are, the less time you have for service. So, those ones who were coming for rehearsals, yes, they were coming for rehearsals because, well, they are coming. Some of them, God used that opportunity to equip them, to give them tools that they now excel, that they now use to do well, through which they are now doing well. For some others, they just use it to pass time until they also succeed. So when they succeed, they do not have time to come for rehearsal. So it became a thing. And if you look at you watching me today now, if you can look at your choir or your praise team, as the case may be, wherever you are, look at those who are most committed, those who you will find in all the rehearsals. They are either those who are looking for jobs, those who are, you know what I mean. Now, the big boys, the big girls, those who are working in very big places, they don't have that much time. They might love singing, they might really want to sing, but they don't have that much time. They might contribute to things, help people do this in church and all that, do this in choir. I want to do this. They know those who call to, but coming for rehearsals, preparing for ministration, you will not often find them so available. Not because they don't want to, but their time doesn't allow them. Their work doesn't allow them. So those ones who are now available, once they also find the job or they become as gainfully employed as the other ones, what happens? You guess right. They also become unavailable for service. So why did I say that I see churches repeating the same mistake that they did with the instrumentalists? Here's what I mean. I've seen churches that had young people who loved singing. Love singing. But how did they treat those young people who love singing, who are available to serve? They come for rehearsals and they're ready to serve. How does the church treat them at that point where they're available? Because this is something they love doing. So what is the church doing for them at that time when they are available? I was talking to some young guys the other day. I say it's best to pursue these things when you are young and you don't have so much bills to pay. I can say that from experience. I started playing in the instrument at the age of 9. It was for fun. I did it for fun until the year 2000. That was when I sat down and asked myself a few questions. Now, as you grow older, bills begin to come. You begin to have responsibilities. Your passion, that's what some people say, passion is overrated. If your passion has not started paying your bills, well, you would have to find something that will pay your bills and not rely on passion. And this is fundamentally what has been happening in the music space in the church. These young people are available to serve. They are available to serve. And the church uses them. Okay, let me not use the word use them, but the church, well, they serve in church. They serve in church without the church thinking about them and saying, okay, these people are serving. What can we do? What happens tomorrow if they are not there? How can we, what do we do? Just believe that, well, let's just continue until they are not available. What do we have today? We have many churches with music departments that are performing below what I would consider the minimum acceptable standard. Most churches that I know of have only one rehearsal in a week. Only one rehearsal in a week. And the truth is that you cannot achieve excellence with one rehearsal a week. You cannot. I am saying you cannot, capital cannot achieve excellence with one rehearsal a week. For me, what you need is a minimum of 3 rehearsals a week to achieve excellence. You need a minimum of 3 rehearsals a week to achieve excellence for any church music department. But this is basically impossible, especially in places like Lagos, Abuja, where people are busy. It's practically impossible because they are working. They can't give you that 3 rehearsals a week. So what we are left with is now, well, we just come and people do freestyle. Come on Sunday, do freestyle. So come on Saturday, we spend some time. We do. Come on Sunday, we do freestyle. Nobody spends time to really prepare for ministration, except those churches who have now been forced to take the next step, which is to now hire singers who we call core singers. So some churches hire like 6 singers and they have them as their core singers. So those ones will be coming for rehearsals like 3-4 times a week, prepare most of the stuff that is going to be done. So when the other people come, they just come and join them and but they are the heart of the ministration. They are the heart of the music team. That is where today, any church that says they want to have great music, that's what I tell them. You're going to have to hire core singers because your people won't have the time to prepare. Music is jealous. I always tell people, music is a jealous profession. If you don't give it time, you cannot deliver. So in your music department, if you do not have up to 3 quality rehearsals, of these 3, 1 rehearsal will be with the musicians alone. But if you don't have 3 quality rehearsals, or at least 2 rehearsals with the singers. Many churches say they have 2 rehearsals, but when you really look at it, they don't actually have 2 rehearsals. What they have is 1 rehearsal and 1, well, maybe especially the ones within the week. The number of people that come for the rehearsal are not much. When people are coming, they are coming late from work. They are tired, they are fagged out, so you can't expect much from them. So basically, you have 1 rehearsal a week, and there's nothing much you can expect from this kind of situation. It's little wonder that we have. Off the top of my head, I cannot mention one church that has a good choir. Many churches have now reverted to praise teams. I call the I say or what I say is a more manageable group of singers, the praise team. Choir is demanding. To have a group of people, 24, 30 people. In those days, we used to have churches that have mass choir. I know that some churches still have massive choirs. I won't call them massive choirs that don't deliver much, because it takes time. I mean, it takes work. You have to work. You have to rehearse. You have to prepare. So many churches cannot afford that. So they stick with the praise team thing. And even with the praise team thing, they still have the same issues. It's just that they can easily maneuver and do their freestyle about the freestyle. So once the drummer puts on a loop, everything goes on. It's just plain, and it goes. There are few churches that really maintain good standard, and when you see them minister, you know that these people prepared. There are very few, and that's the excellence that is beginning to lack in most of our churches. Excellence is now missing in most of our music departments, and it's a sad thing. Though most churches now have praise teams, which are supposed to be manageable, more manageable, you can see how much trust they have in this praise team by the frequency at which they invite the established ministers, gospel ministers, for their events. Check it out. Every major church that has any major events, they will call big names, big gospel ministers to come and minister, but they have praise teams. How effective are their praise teams? If their praise teams were as effective as they should be, yes, they would always invite, maybe for different they're going to invite, but it will not be as frequent as it currently is. I basically have no problem with it, but it speaks to some things that many churches have also not sat down to consider. You see those big names, many of the gospel artists that we have today in Nigeria. I knew a few of them. I knew a few of them before they became huge. They were all young people in church. There's one particular one that I knew when she was in the choir. I was teaching the choir. A friend of mine was also teaching the choir. They were just young people who, how much appreciation were they shown while they were there? So what we are now seeing is that the young people who are in the church's praise team today see that what the church spends on inviting one guest minister is more than what the church is willing to spend on the entire praise team for a year. They see this, and the message is clear. You know, these messages are subtle. Even if people don't know that they are receiving the message is getting straight to them. So everybody's goal is to become a major gospel musician. That's especially for those who are pursuing it, who want to pursue it professionally. They are in church. They see that, okay, when we have programs, the church will spend millions inviting that guest speaker, that guest musician. And some of them feel that there's nothing this person is doing that we can't do. But the church is not giving us the support. The church is not giving us any kind of encouragement. So what happens? They begin to struggle. They begin to try to grow, to become established. And once they become established, they don't have time for you again. They don't have time for that church. So look at all the big names that you know. I'm sure if we were to ask, you randomly, name a big gospel musician you know, you will name a number. If we ask you which church they are in, we likely won't know. Apart from a few. A particular church spent a lot of time, a particular church was known for raising musicians. But even that church currently has issues with those musicians that they raised. But, well, that's not the subject for today. What we're looking at is the turnover. So these guys now, they don't feel appreciated. So eventually, they are also heading out like the musicians. It's still the issue of commercializing the talent that they have, because they feel that that's the only way they will be appreciated. That's the only way they will live a good life. I cannot live a good life if I decide to stay in church and be singing. I cannot live a good life if I decide to be playing keyboard in the church. The quality of life I will live is automatically stunted. Let us look at a church like Hillsong, for example. Hillsong has albums. They have songs. People write songs, and there are copyright laws. If I write a song for Hillsong, I get paid for the songs I write as a songwriter. If I perform a song under Hillsong, I get paid. I get rewarded for my effort. So the musicians who are at Hillsong, who are putting in their all, they're not just putting in their all because they love God. No. They also have a future. Their future is, they can see things that they are gaining from it. Peter asked Jesus Christ a question. He said, Lord, we have given all and followed you. What shall we gain from all these things? Jesus did not say, shut up, my friend. This is the work of God. You are doing ministry. No. Just give them specifics of what they are to gain. And that's one question that, I don't know. Many church leaders believe that that's a wrong question to ask. What's the need for us? What's the need for me? Especially for these guys who are doing this professionally. Asking what's the need for me is not wrong. If you understand that they are doing the service, they're rendering the service, an important service, and that is their source of livelihood, then they should be treated properly to help them have a future, see themselves living a good life, doing what they love doing that service to God. This is not one of those things where I would have a solution. But I can just suggest a few things. One of the things that I would suggest is that churches need to begin to take a closer look at their music departments. They need to begin to pay closer attention and take their welfare seriously. I know a church in Nigeria, in Lagos, Nigeria. They have a policy. Once you're a pastor in that church, you must have your own property. But that's nice. Once you're a pastor in that church, you must have your own property. The church, not that the church will buy a property and give you, no. The church will help you facilitate mortgage so you can acquire a property once you are a pastor. Now, the music director in that church, for the church, it took fight, please, okay, let me not fight literally, but it took a lot of pleas, a lot of back and forth, a lot of, it's not good now, before the church bought a car for the music director. Personally, I don't even like the idea of churches buying cars for, we see it sometimes, the pastor will come and line up and say, we bought a cars for all the musicians, and they will say, oh, that's fine. Well, that's fine as a gift and all that. But that's not structure. That's not structure. I personally don't like charity. I see it as charity. There's the church where the pastor gave his music director a G-Wagon. When I heard about it, I asked them, so you're giving a music director a G-Wagon. Okay. How much is his allowance? How much does he make? Is he a professional music director? Is he a professional musician? If how much does he make? Let's ask the question. Can he maintain a G-Wagon? That G-Wagon might not actually be a blessing. Might not be a curse. Because even if he decides to sell it, he might not sell it at a good price. It might be sold at a good giveaway price. I personally prefer to have a structured welfare plan for the musicians. Many years ago, I applied for a job as a music director in a church in the US, and I was really, really intrigued by the package. They offered your allowance, your this, including vacation. It's all planned out. You have it clear. No doubt, there's no debate about. My welfare is not left to the whims or feelings of the man, of the pastor. It's not that it depends on how I wake up. I just wake up, I come to church today, and they play, and the music enter, but you just come out and just say, come out. This guy has been faithful. Come out and stand there. Come out, please. Let's church. This boy has been faithful. He has been faithful. Let's We are going to bless him. We're going to bless him. You begin to raise money for him. I've seen that, and people feel, oh, that's nice. For me, that's not structure. That's not structure. You raised money for him that day. So those other ones, Uncle, are you raising money for them? After that, what happens? It's best to have a structure, a plan, so that the guys know that this is the structure that we are working with. This is what we get at the end of the month. Why we teach musicians, which is something I do, in subsequent episodes, I will be talking to musicians specifically. I mean, that will be between our musicians. We'll be talking about some things and looking at the issue of sustenance and all that. But for now, we're talking about the church having a proper welfare system for their music department. And I'm not just talking about the instrumental, it's more about your music department. If the churches can plan their music departments in this age and time, the music department can be profitable. I mean, your music department can, for example, again, Hillsong. Hillsong is a church music department, but they are profitable. So it's not just about bringing funds. It's not about paying salaries. It's about sitting down and asking, what can we do? I've had churches say they want to set up a record label. I only know of one church that has managed to do that. I've only heard of other people talking about it. But the church has a structure that can empower, help them keep these young people structured, help them keep these young people serving God. One of the challenges that I faced, or I didn't face it personally, but I know a lot of guys around me who face it. I grew up in a comfortable home. My parents were pretty much comfortable as we were growing up. Yes, until we started having jobs, but we grew up. So I didn't experience some things that some of my friends back then experienced. So we had a situation where many of these guys, there was no line. I mean, like, I can't play here, no. Anywhere is anywhere. Once you pay me, I'll play. Be it a club. In fact, there was a particular church in Lagos back then. The musicians were coming straight from club to church Sunday morning. Because club Saturday night, they will play club Saturday night and come to church on Sunday morning and play. So while we can say anything we want to say about these musicians who engaged in this, if we set the right structures in place, many of them will not go that route. Today we have many of our church boys playing everywhere, anywhere. We see them playing anywhere and everywhere. They don't care. They can even begin to argue with you that no, it's not wrong. I can play anywhere. That's another subject we're going to discuss down the line. But it's all because of mammon, what the Bible calls mammon, money. So we can help these ones. Let's not just see it as helping them live. Let's see it as helping retain their souls for God. The Bible says, the Lord's Prayer says, lead us not into temptation. We must not allow our young musicians to be led into temptation. We must not be the ones helping them to be tempted and then encouraging them not to fall for the temptation. Let's provide an environment that allows for them to focus on what God has called them to do. So I believe that this back and forth on distrust between churches and musicians started long ago. It started with the disrespect the feeling, and it started back then, and it has grown up till this point. Now the musicians are doing a lot better, but that mindset is still there. You will find very few musicians who understand, who don't have this mindset. And when you find those musicians who don't have this mindset, the way they operate is also different. They distance themselves from being tied down to church. They just offer their services without. You have musicians say, I don't want to be paid. I'll do what I can do when I have time. I know that they just do what they can do. But that history, I think we can begin to correct it. Our churches can begin to correct it. Our musicians have their own role, but our churches can begin to correct it by beginning to have a proper mindset concerning the music department. All this talk has led to, we've talked about the welfare department a lot, and it has led us to what we'll be discussing in the next episode of this podcast. That issue, the contentious issue of whether or not musicians should be paid in church. And we'll be looking at this extensively in the next episode. what we want to achieve here is having an effective music ministry. We want churches to have effective music ministries. I understand a lot of things that happen in the music ministry, in the music department. It's a delicate department that needs to be handled well. Remember, it was the ministry that the devil was operating in. So it's a delicate department and has to be handled with a lot of delicacy. This journey down memory lane has been fun. It has reminded me about a lot of things that we experienced back in the day. And sadly, some of those things are still happening in one way or the other today. But it has helped us lay a foundation that we shall build on as we proceed in this podcast. This foundation should have opened your eyes. Hopefully, you have seen some of the things that has contributed to where we are today, why some churches are having the issues they're having with their music departments. In the next episode, we'll be discussing the issue of paying church musicians. Is it right? Is it wrong? And we shall not be basing our discussion only on common sense or logic. We shall be looking at the Bible. What does the Bible have to say about it? Does the Bible support it? Does the Bible kick against it? We've had some pastors say strong things against paying musicians. In fact, someone said one person actually said anybody who collects money from to play the drums is cursed. Well, but is that what the Bible said? We'll be looking at that at the next episode of this podcast. So it's been an exciting time. We've raised more questions than answers, but hey, that's what we're here to do. Like I warned you, we'll be raising a lot of questions and trying to answer those that we can. We raise these questions so that you can also make your own input. Tell us what you think. Tell us what your ideas are. I want to hear from you guys. You can leave a comment here, or you can send a message to me. Let's hear what you have to say. If you have an opinion also of the history, if you have your own perspective of what happened, how we got to where we are today, please share. Let's share what we have and see how we can grow together. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of Music Ministry with Chime. Please remember to like and share this video. You should also subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so that you know when new episodes drop. Do well to also follow me on all my social media handles as displayed on the screen. For those listening, it is Donald Chime. That's DONALD Chime, CHIME. On X, that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Till I come your way again next week, stay blessed and have a fulfilling week in God's presence. Thank you very much.